Welcome back to another episode of the Campfire Series podcast. I'm your host, Logan Soforenko. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us and being loyal. We have another amazing interview this week in our sports segment. It is sports broadcaster Kevin Brown. Kevin spends some of his time calling games for the Orioles and also calling some college hoops on ESPN. We talked about the upcoming MLB season, and he also gave me some advice about being a sports broadcaster. With that, he also explained how theater is important to him and how he compares the craft of broadcasting to theater, like Lin-Manuel Miranda. Walk me through your life, how you got the job, your endeavors that led you up to getting the play-by-play voice for the Orioles. Your time, you do a little bit of college hoops, correct?
Yes, yeah, do a lot of hoops for ESPN and among other various sports for ESPN.
We saw you had a little fun with the Christmas theme on your social media.
I did.
So walk me through. Let's start off. Let's go with square one. University, college. Where did you study? How did that play a factor? And a little bit about your time in college.
Sure. I went to Syracuse University, which is not a surprise for any young white male doing play-by-play on TV or radio. There are a lot of us out there. The Newhouse Mafia, I believe they're colloquially referred to, because of the Newhouse School of Communications. Yeah, I went to Syracuse for 4 years. I worked at the student radio station there. The student station there is WAER FM, and it is the real attraction. I mean, the school itself is wonderful, but AER is the place where Marty Glickman got his start, and Marv Albert after him, and after him, Sean McDonough and Mike Tirico and Ian Eagle and Dave Pash and Jason Benetti and so many of the folks who have dotted the landscape of this business basically since its inception. And it was humbling always to walk into the studios and look up the wall and see pictures of those folks and realize that, you know, if it's not the exact same physical building they were in, but metaphorically, you're walking the same ground they did and you're doing the same things they did. So I was the sports director there my junior year, leading into most of my senior year, and had the chance to broadcast football and basketball and lacrosse and any number of things at SU, which led me to my first job at a college, which was doing AAA baseball in Syracuse. Fortunately, there was an opening for a team right there. But, you know, I'm like a lot of people in the industry that will tell you that Syracuse was a great springboard to them. And as much as anything, the people I met there and the connections I was able to make were so huge for me.
Was there like obviously a competitive, not edge, but mindset, you know, all these legends that you mentioned that went to Syracuse and are now, you know, big names in the business. Was there that weight on your shoulder during your studying time?
It's partly that, and it's also partly that the competition that's directly in front of you is so serious. The first meeting as a freshman, just a few days into school at WAR, you walk downstairs to the basement of the radio station and you're sitting amongst maybe 30, 35, 40 kids, same age as you. Every one of them is wearing either a jersey or a t-shirt or a hat of their favorite team, just because we all had to prove that we were the biggest sports fans in the room. And you realize that this is an extraordinarily competitive field. And you get that right from the start, because here are dozens and dozens of your peers who want to do the thing you do. And to make it at the radio station, you have to get up at 5 a.m. once a week, and you have to go in and write a mock sportscast, and you have to go into a recording booth and perform a 2.5, 3-minute sportscast as if you are the actual on-air person delivering the morning sports update. And then you get that critiqued by an upperclassman for a few weeks. And those of you who are deemed to have some degree of potential, you move on and you keep writing, and you get assigned your own specific personnel director. And some people don't. I mean, people after literally a month are cut from the program. And think about that. This place is so competitive that you have people, you know, young men largely, and some women, but it was mostly men. It is mostly a male-dominated field. And all of us are 17, 18, 19 years old. We're paying, or our parents are paying, exorbitant sums to go there. And a lot of us still have student loans for years. And within 4 weeks, there are people that are told, yeah, you're not cut out for this. And you have to change course very quickly. So yeah, I realized very quickly on not just the pressure of the alums, but the pressure of your peers. I mean, there are plenty of people that I went to school with and was in class with, succeeding in the business in a lot of different ways. And I would be remiss to not call them some of my best friends. And they're also people that I was in direct competition with in school. And, even to an extent right now, you're going for the same jobs. So that competitive spirit, I think it has to be part of what drives people there. Because you're going to be reminded from day one that you can't just waltz in and say, I'm going to do this and take my time and not put the effort in. Because if you don't, here are a dozen kids that are going to put in the effort, and they're going to zoom right past you very quickly.
So where did the drive for you and passion start? Say, hey, I want to be a play-by-play guy, like during high school or before then. And obviously, going off of that, what gave you the edge in college? Was it obviously your talent and your knowledge for sports? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, to the first part of the question, probably pretty young. I'm around age 8 or 9. The formative moment that I remember is sitting on the stage of a PAL basketball all-star game in which my dad was coaching, in which I was certainly not playing. I don't think I had scored a basket to that point in my hallowed youth career. And I just started calling the game to myself. Why? Unclear, but I did. And I remember, I'm sure I must have driven the parents next to me crazy, but at the end of the game, they said, or one of them, the dad said, hey, great job, Marv. And I got a real kick out of that. That put the worm in my brain. I just was a sports obsessive at the time. I played, I watched, I listened to it on radio, and I guess I was a naturally chatty kid and I just fell into it. But the weird thing is I didn't pursue it at all in high school. There wasn't a program in high school, and I just wasn't ambitious enough to make one of my own. But I had the feeling that I wanted to do it. So I went to college. And to the second part of your question, when I got to college, what helped me to succeed? I like to think there's part of it that's just a natural intelligence that I have nothing to do with, that I was just blessed to have. But, talent-wise, I think I have a respectable voice now. And I think by and large, people would hear this and say, oh, he sounds good. That was not the case in college. I had a very whiny, over-the-top Long Island accent. And that's just not acceptable if you want to be on the air. Maybe like a local sports radio station in Suffolk County. But other than that, you just can't have that. So I had to work pretty hard at kind of beating that out of myself and changing what was my normal speech pattern. I just tried to out hustle everybody and go sit in the back of the bleachers at a football game or a basketball game or a lacrosse game, not even Syracuse, local high school game, and just bring a little recorder and call the game to myself, whether I knew the players or not. Sometimes a friend and I would go to a lacrosse game, not have a roster, and we just work on the mechanics, and we'd make up musicians. Be Jack White passes it to Dave Matthews, who shoots. We didn't know what these kids were. We just wanted to get a feel for it. And I learned it was about the repetition of it. So I'd like to think that I have not always been a person that's had a great work ethic in everything I've done. I understand that, but I think my work ethic in college, as it came to this and as it's come to this field, was good. And I knew also to attach myself to the right people and the smart people and listen to them. And tried to be humble in that respect, not thinking I was better than I was, but actually listening to the upperclassmen and to the alums that knew what they were doing. So I guess some alchemy of all that is how I ended up becoming successful in college and on my way out of college.
This is a selfish goal for myself. I know everyone at the end of the year wants to make a tape. You mentioned going to local high school games and all that stuff. Can you use that on a tape? Would you recommend that? because I know right now in this Zoom world and pandemic world, it's pretty hard to make a tape. I mean, I go to a liberal arts school, so we're not first in line to get the season back up, but the plan is to do 10 games. Would you recommend making a tape using some stuff you did just at local high schools?
I mean, I guess it depends who the tape is for. It depends on the quality of it. If you're trying to get hired by ESPN, I wouldn't send them a high school tape off a little recorder. But if you're asking people who you trust to critique your stuff, it depends on the context. Like I would just take my $10. I'd call the game and I'd go to one of the classmen and say, hey, can we carve out a time? Now I probably wouldn't send that to Ian Eagle. I would send him something a little more polished, but that was the way that we got better, was just finding people who are a little bit closer to us in stature, but were smarter and more experienced and willing to listen. So it's a natural step. None of us go from not making a tape to having a professional grade game with an analyst and an effects microphone and a reporter. I think it's just a natural step in the progression of everything.
It's really fascinating. Obviously, you've been through the stages where it was, you doing the games, and then you have an analyst, and then all of a sudden you're doing games from your home on ESPN, and now you're calling games for MASN. So I want to fast forward a little bit now, because big baseball fan. I hate to say I'm a Red Sox fan, so I watch a lot of division games, and sometimes I switch the broadcast. I usually watch NESN, because that's the Red Sox one, and then I watch the Orioles one, because I love hearing the goodbye home run. I love hearing that. But with that being said, walk me through how A, you got the job, and B, the expectations you have for yourself coming up and filling in some pretty big shoes.
Sure. So to the first part of that, it was 2019. I had called 7 years of minor league baseball in Syracuse, New York. Worked with Jason Benetti, who's now the voice of the White Sox and is brilliant and unparalleled at his job. And he taught me basically everything I know. 2017, my last year in Syracuse, I had the chance to fill in on some radio games with the Washington Nationals, who were the Chiefs' parent club at the time. And 2018, I had the chance to fill in on some radio games for the Toronto Blue Jays, who were in the mix of shaking up their broadcast booth. I did some spring training games and then some games in New York for them. So 2019, it's probably January when this all went down. Joe Angel, longtime radio voice of the Orioles, decided to retire. And Jim Hunter was the primary radio voice, but the Orioles were looking for somebody younger to supplement Jim and to do 50, 60 games. So I hadn't heard about this job at all. My agent reached out to me and he said, hey, I hear the Orioles are looking for somebody. Would you be interested? Sure, let's send them my stuff. And this is just the way the process goes. There are a number of openings a year. Dozens and dozens and dozens of people in the industry send their tape or have their agents send their tape. And most of the time you don't hear back. I think I'm used to it, and anybody else in my profession that you talk to would be used to that happening. But the Orioles got back to us and they said, we'd like Kevin's tape. And eventually got to a point where I sat down with one of the executives at MASN, who happened to be in New York. When I was in New York, we went out and got lunch. And I thought, okay, I'm probably one of a few finalists. And by the end of the meal, he was talking about my role in the team and where he saw me fitting in the future. And I just realized, I think I have the job. And then the next week I was on a train to Baltimore meeting with Greg Bader, who's now my boss with the Orioles. And it was abundantly clear that the job was mine at that point. And it snowballed very quickly. And I've talked to friends in the industry who've had similar experiences. You hear nothing for weeks, for months. Then all of a sudden one meeting and you don't know what's been going on behind the scenes and you have the job. And what probably happened was, I actually know this happened. The Orioles and the Nationals both air their games on MASN. And there are there are folks that work on both teams. So there's a shared connection there to an extent. And when I did the Nationals games on radio, I at least made some impression, and some of the folks around the Nationals and MASN got to know my name and thought I must have done a good job filling in. So when the Orioles thing came up, my name was essentially on the list from having filled in with the Nationals 2 years prior. A random opportunity that came up because Charlie Slows of the Nationals had a son's graduation. It happened to be my final year with the team. It happened to be a time when I was able to do the games, and my AAA team let me have the opportunity. And yeah, the stars were just aligned there for me to get some major league tape, and one thing led to another, and that's how I got the gig in 2019. So fast forward to this year, you mentioned goodbye home run. Gary Thorne, as of a couple of days ago, is not returning, along with a bunch of other broadcasters who've been with the team for a long time. I don't want to say older because everybody's older than me. I look like I'm 16. I the cliche answer is also the way I genuinely feel, which is that I don't think I'm replacing Gary Thorne the way I didn't feel like I was replacing Joe Angel. I'm me. I call a game a specific way. It's influenced by a lot of people, but I'm never going to walk into the radio booth and say, all right, I have to be Joe Angel now, or walk into the TV booth and say, I have to be Gary Thorne now. It's not even my full-time job because Scott Garso is doing the majority of the games on TV. So I don't genuinely feel like I am replacing Gary. There is no one who can be Gary Thorne. No one will replace Gary Thorne. The next person will come in and do the job well. Scott will do the job well, and I feel like I'll do the job well. It's the absolute cliche answer. It's the total media trained athlete, one game at a time thing. But like, that's the way I think of it. I don't walk in and think, all right, now I'm in Gary's seat. I feel like that's an instant losing proposition. Whenever you try to be somebody you're not. So I'm just going to keep doing my thing and hopefully doing it well.
And that's okay if that's the response. You said something where it was a lot of people, influence your craft. You don't want to imitate them, but really looking forward to seeing you making it your own. But with that being said, what are you looking forward to the most in this upcoming season?
Man, just calling baseball again and being at a park. I don't think we'll be on the road for most of the year, if at all. I think that's going to be the way that the season starts for every team, with COVID still such an issue across the country. But even so, you're still in a ballpark, and half the time you're still watching the game in front of you, and that makes such a difference compared to doing games in the room I'm currently talking to in my office. I got a chance to fill in on about 7 TV games last year, 7 TV games. And I had not done Major League Baseball on TV until last year. This year I'm going to get to do about 60. And that's a thrill. I love doing baseball on radio. It's the purest form of the medium, but I think TV fits my skill set really well. And I loved working with Ben McDonald last year. And Jim Palmer is coming back. Jim Palmer, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, Hall of Famer, Baltimore icon. I get to call games with him. That is outrageously cool and will be so much fun. So to have the chance to work with those two and to see live baseball again, I don't need anything more than that. That is excitement enough.
And especially with the way Baltimore played last season, they missed the playoffs just barely, but they've been in a serious rebuilding phase, and they're looking to, go deep in the next couple of years. So it's going to be exciting to see how that goes. And, sadly for my Red Sox, you got to battle the Blue Jays. It's going to be one of the hardest divisions in the year. So good luck in sending all the love to doing this season on the games that you do call and the games that you don't, just watching it and how exciting that's going to be for you. And with that being said, segueing kind of back to basketball, so someone who's never done basketball before and is not going to have an analyst with them. It's just them doing it by, themselves. What advice would you give that person? And especially if this is a big hypothetical, because this is potentially me. What advice could you give to that person for tape that's not out there? These teams that they're playing, it's D3. There's not that much out there, and there's no analyst, but you have to do it.
Sure. First thing I would say is every game I do, I make a point to call up the SID, the sports information director for both teams. I don't know what the athletic communication staffs are like in Division III, but SIDs are the people that do game notes and set up interviews and all those sorts of things. And they know the teams as intimately as anybody. So I always like to just carve it aside, even if it's 15, 20 minutes, and say, just tell me some big picture things that I'm not going to see on film. You know the players, you see them in practice, you see them every day. What are some interesting stories? Give me a couple of lines on this guy, on that guy, who's healthy, who's not. It's a world where local media has sadly been cut in a lot of places, and some of the teams I cover, Division I teams, don't have any local media, and you can't find out anything unless you talk to the SIDs. So they're very helpful, even if you can tape. I you still steal 15, 20 minutes with them. The other thing is you don't have to know things about all the players to work on the craft. There are always specifics to work on. You could walk up to a court right now and see a 5-on-5 game and not know anything about any of the players, and you could still work on the fundamentals, on pacing, on the tone of your voice, on saying the time and score and the direction and the uniform colors and the specifics of where the ball is and location. Those sorts of things are universal, right? I always try to have one or two things every broadcast to work on, because if I try to work on 8 different things, my head explodes. It's, if we wake up, generally I've found, and we have 15 things to do in a day, and we say, oh God, I have 15 things, none of them are going to get done. If we say, all right, I'm going to write out the first 2 things I have to do. Okay, those 2 things are done. Let's move on. Breaking up, I think, assignments or work or responsibilities into bite-sized pieces, I think fits in life, and it fits in broadcasting. I'm never good if I go onto the air and say I have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, because it's okay to have some of that stuff swirling around your brain, but also you have to pay attention to the game. The most important thing is literally what is happening in front of your eyes, what is going on in the game, right? So I like to just write down a note to myself, put it on my charts, put it on a roster, couple of words, couple of lines, what I want to accomplish. Be more present, smile, be engaged, ask questions, whatever it may be, and work on that specific thing, or maybe those 2 specific things. Because the worst thing we can do is say, we've got to know every little bit here, we've got to cram, we have to be the complete expert, and I've got to bury my head in my charts because there's so much good information here. Yes, there is good information there if you put in the work, but people want to know what's happening on the floor. And that is the absolute best advice I can give, is make the most important thing you do calling the game well. Whether you know everything or not, you can still call the game.
I could not have been said any better. Forgive me for the tricky wording. You asked me about, what I intend to do on this podcast, and I love learning. We're in times of learning, especially college students. Any advice we can get, not just in our craft, but just in general right now, I feel like learning and listening is just so important. So I appreciate you giving me that advice. Now, I want to hear something a little different. This is a little related to the pandemic. You're calling games on screens.
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching a lot of NBA on TNT. There is a very big delay in the broadcast and the game. So, and also there's things that you see on the monitor that you don't see, or that you see if you're in the arena, but you don't see it if you're on the monitor. So
Totally.
what has it been like calling games on screens? I know it's a little bit challenging, but I guarantee you it's probably still just as fun.
It's challenging. The only reason I wouldn't say is that it's not just as fun as the relationships. When I'm at a game, you can associate all the things around being present, not just being in the arena and soaking up the atmosphere. And there isn't much of an atmosphere now because there are either no fans or limited fans in arenas, but getting to get breakfast with your producer, go talk to the coaches in person at shoot around, go get a bite to eat or a drink after the game with your analyst or with your crew. Like seeing the different cities, eating in local restaurants, exploring, the Riverwalk at Cincinnati, or going to the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. None of that stuff I get to do now, obviously. So I miss the experience around the game as much as being at the game itself. The broadcasts themselves, the mechanics of them are not too bad. I do like to look at the monitor more than the field or the surface for certain sports on TV. For baseball, I call every pitch off the monitor because that's what you are seeing at home. And the angle I have watching the pitch from behind home plate is not as good as the angle of the center field camera. Basketball, you do call the game off the floor and you don't use the monitor as much, but you can see everything. You can see generally all 10 players on the center court camera we have. So that's not too bad. You miss substitute. Those are hard to pick up. We only have a couple of angles, and I have a 35-inch monitor, which shows the game and the program feed, which goes out over the air. The other angle, which stays on center court the whole time, is in a separate window on my laptop, which is smaller, and it's harder to see who's coming in and out of the game. So that's the most difficult thing, is you'll call a play, somebody's fouled, replay, and then you look at the court and there are 4 different players on there than there were last time. Technology is not perfect. It's amazing that we can do this. It's an extraordinary technological accomplishment. But there are still days where the feed's a little bit choppy. It's not 100% smooth, and it's just not a natural human fluidity. Sometimes the shot goes up and the video is a little bit choppy before it goes in the basket. And if there's a close call, an official can't come over and tell you what it is. If there's a foul called, we see a whistle, we see the official start to signal, and then our camera's cutting away to a coach or going to a replay or graphic, and sometimes we just don't know administratively what just happened. So those are the challenges, and it's more difficult when you're speaking to somebody over Zoom and you don't have the nonverbal language of realizing when you're sitting next to them, hey, you're going to talk now. So it's a little bit awkward. A couple of times a game, you'll step on each other. Obvious things, but challenges all the same. It's still fun. It's still fun to talk basketball right now, and to provide any degree of entertainment in this world is something I don't take for granted, even if it is in a different format than we'd like it.
I mean, you hit it right on the head. We're fascinated that we can even do this, and people can, broadcast games from their garage or their office. But there are those, delays, but that's not a problem. I'm sure they'll fix that, in the coming years. This is kind of a experiment that they brought up, but it's really fascinating seeing how most of the time, and 99% of the time, I can't even tell. And it's fascinating. I caught a game the other week. I can't remember who was playing, but of yours, and just blown away by your craft. I just needed to say that as a spectator and a fan. So, and with that being said, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. Before we wrap up, you mentioned something, how you are a broadcaster who wanted to get into theater. This is just a nerd in me. I just want to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think of broadcasting as a craft and art, the same way that musical theater is an art, the same way that stand-up comedy is an art, the same way that a great stage magician is an artist. I watch games and I watch other broadcasters, and I take influences from all of them, but sometimes I would rather just model what I do after, like Mike Birbiglia or John Mulaney, or I get inspiration from, Lin-Manuel Miranda. I think it's limiting to just say, well, I talk about sports for a living, so I have to just watch the sports people. Like, sports is a game, and there is an art to basketball, right? There is an art to soccer. There is a great artistry to the playing of sports. But I do think the broadcasting of sports has just as much to do with being a performer. We are entertainers. You watch a game because you want to watch your favorite team sometimes. But sometimes you just turn on Memphis and Houston, and you don't care about Memphis or Houston. You just want to be entertained, maybe informed about those players. It's our job as broadcasters to keep people engaged and to make people have fun. Like, this is fun. This is ridiculous. I get paid to talk about a sporting event that I'm not participating in. That's insane. I realize how insane that is sometimes. And I never want to lose my sense of fun. I can't just go on the air and just say, this is fun for 2 hours straight, right? Like there has to be a craft to that. And I'm just fascinated by performers of any kind. I live in New York and I haven't been able to go see a show for a year. I desperately miss the chance to go to Broadway or to go to a concert to see a great singer or a great storyteller, or taping a podcast. All these things are influences on me, and I probably spend more time either reading or listening to music or watching a great film or documentary than I do watching like a random basketball game. And maybe that's not the way everybody thinks about the craft. I know some people do in the industry, and I know there are people, the ones that I admire, that do think of it that way. But it is an art. I mean, I was the lead in the 8th grade school play, and I kind of wish I had not just given up theater in high school just to play gym and run around. Like, who knows where that would have gone. I love this career. I'm happy with it. Don't get me wrong. But I think those are the kind of tools that really make the difference. And the great sportscasters are not just the people who are consumed by sports. They are the ones who I think can expand their mind into a number of different horizons. Like I love Ian Eagle. I mentioned his name earlier. Ian's parents were both in theater in some capacity. His dad was an actor. His dad is on a famous Xerox commercial. Ian could be a stand-up comic tomorrow. Ian's one of the funniest people in the world. He could do anything he wants in a performance space. He does this. And I think one of the reasons he's so great is that he has that performance mechanism. He knows how to listen to people. He knows how to work with a partner. He knows when to be funny, when to give information. And he's not just somebody who sticks his head in the sports section of a paper. So people like that are the ones that I admire. And I always try to think of this job as not just, two meatheads talking about a game, but a performance of sorts.
That's really fascinating hearing that, and also you got a little John Mulaney in your face a little bit. That's obviously you.
I'll take it.
Do you have any nerves before going on the air? I assume there has to be just a little bit, but then once you do it a number of times, I'm sure it's just like, okay, routine.
Not really, which I know sounds like a very arrogant answer. I have like happy anxieties, maybe. I don't know what the right way is to say it. I'm excited. I'm a pent up ball of energy as I'm about to go on the air. I'm clapping my hands together. I'm producers counting down 5, 4, 3. I always make a joke. Hey, where are we? What channel are we on? Who's playing? Like, shut up, Kevin. 2, 1. But I try to stay loose and be light on my feet. But no, I've been nervous a couple of times. We all have, but I'm just like, I'm not anxious that it's going to be a bad broadcast. I'm just anxious to get on the air and to start doing what I love. I was probably pretty nervous before my first major league game when I walked into the booth, and you go from AAA to the skyline of Pittsburgh, and then you sit down on the microphone and you go, okay, I've done this hundreds of times. It's just a different level, but the rules are the same. The balls and the strikes look the same. A bunch of these guys are guys I saw in AAA. It's no big deal. And I think that comes with time and experience.
Well, thank you, Kevin, so much for everything and the advice and the stories and just taking some time out of your day. I wish you the best of luck in everything coming up in the next couple of months, whether that be basketball or baseball, or, it's going to be a fun year for your career. And I'm looking forward to watching you along the way and following you. And, it's pretty inspiring.
I appreciate it, Logan. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. You have a great day, and stay safe out there.
I will do my best. You're in California. You stay safe. Shoot.
Oh, that's a whole other topic, but absolutely, we'll certainly do my best. We at least got the weather.
Yes, we don't have that here. It was sleeting today.
Oh, yeah. There's been some weird rain and weird snow that's been actually hitting some parts in California that doesn't normally, get snow. Like the hills and mountains of Malibu got some hail that looked like snow, but everyone said,
Wow.
"Oh, it's a snow in Malibu." I'm like, "No, it's hail. I was there."
Nice.
Well, you take care and stay safe. And once again, just thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, you too. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Best of luck.